Change doesn't have to be loud and growth doesn't have to be hard. What if while you're asleep, your thoughts could improve, your mindset could reset, and your life could quietly start to shift? This isn't about hustle. This isn't about waking up at 5 a.m. or forcing yourself to think positive. This is about doing something anyone can do. Pressing play before you go to sleep and listen while sleeping and let your reality change without effort. I'll show you how to use your rest time to start training your mind without needing more energy, motivation or focus. While you sleep, your brain is listening and what it hears again and again becomes what it believes. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. You just need better input given consistently during the hours your mind is most open. If you've tried everything and still feel stuck, this is your quiet way forward. Start tonight. Your mind is ready. Chapter 1. Listen while sleeping and let change begin. I want you to think about the hours you spend sleeping every night. Those hours pass whether you plan for them or not. Your body rests. Your breathing slows and your mind becomes quiet in a way it never is during the day. That quiet state matters. It matters because the mind is still working. Even when you are not paying attention, it is still receiving. It is still learning. Most people ignore that time. They treat sleep as empty hours. But empty hours still shape a life. During the day, your mind is busy protecting old habits. It argues, it doubts, it resists new ideas. That is normal. The mind likes what feels familiar, even if familiar is not helpful. But when you sleep, that guard relaxes, the noise fades, the pressure drops. That is when listening can begin to work in a different way. Not through force, not through effort, through quiet repetition. Change does not always require struggle. That idea upsets people because they were taught that everything good must be hard. Hard work matters, but unnecessary struggle does not. When you listen while sleeping, you are not pushing yourself. You are allowing new input to reach you when you are most open. That is the beginning of change without effort. Think about how habits are formed. No one wakes up one day and decides to believe something deeply. Beliefs grow slowly from what we hear again and again, from what we accept as normal, from what sounds familiar. Sleep listening uses this natural process instead of fighting it. You are not forcing the mind to agree. You are simply giving it better material. Picture the feeling of lying in bed at night. The room is quiet. The day is over. Your body feels heavy. Your eyes close. In that moment, you are no longer reacting to emails or worries or other people's opinions. You are just there. That is a powerful place. When calm words enter the mind in that state, they land differently. They feel less like instructions and more like reassurance. Most people try to change their lives by arguing with themselves during the day. They say things like be disciplined or stay motivated. That creates tension. Tension creates resistance. Resistance slows growth. Listening while sleeping removes that tension. There is no debate. There is no pressure. There is just exposure to better thoughts. Over time, the mind starts to treat those thoughts as familiar. Familiar feels safe. Safe feels true. This is how inner change starts. Quietly, gradually, without drama. One night does not transform a life. Repetition does. Night after night, the same supportive messages reach you. They soften old thinking. They loosen emotional habits that were built under stress. Pay attention to mornings, not dramatic mornings, small changes. You wake up feeling slightly calmer, slightly clearer. You respond instead of react. You pause before old habits take control. That pause is powerful. That pause means something inside has shifted. You did not force it. You allowed it. Reality changes when perception changes. Not overnight, not magically, but steadily. When your thinking improves, your choices improve. When your choices improve, your results improve. Listening while sleeping works at the level of thinking first. That is why it feels effortless. You are not chasing outcomes. You are shaping the source. Some people worry they are being passive. They think allowing change means doing nothing. That is not true. Allowing is a skill. Choosing what you listen to is an action. Protecting your mental space is an action. Showing up every night and giving your mind better input is discipline in a quiet form. The mind is like soil. Whatever you plant repeatedly grows. If you plant worry during the day and silence at night, the worry remains. If you plant steady encouraging thoughts during rest, growth begins. You may not notice the first sprouts. That does not mean nothing is happening. It means growth is doing what growth always does. Working beneath the surface first. Emotion plays a role here. When you are relaxed, emotions are softer. Fear is quieter. Hope feels safer. Words heard in that state connect to emotion differently. They feel supportive rather than demanding. That matters because people do not change from pressure. They change when they feel safe enough to let go of old patterns. Listening while sleeping also builds consistency. You do not need extra time. You do not need high energy. You simply use time that already exists. Consistency beats intensity every time. Small steady input over many nights reshapes thinking more effectively than occasional bursts of effort. Some nights you may feel nothing. That is fine. Change does not require constant awareness. It requires consistency. Trust the process. The mind learns through repetition. It always has. Advertising works that way. Music works that way. Opinions spread that way. You are simply choosing to apply this truth to your own life. Over weeks and months, reality begins to respond. Conversations feel easier. Stress feels manageable. Decisions feel clearer. These are signs of internal alignment. You are not forcing positive thinking. You are becoming accustomed to it. That is a very different experience. Effortless does not mean careless. It means aligned. When actions align with how the mind naturally works, effort drops, friction decreases, progress feels smoother. Listening while sleeping respects human psychology instead of fighting it. You do not need to understand every detail. You only need to practice. Choose words that support growth. Play them softly. Create an environment of calm. Do it again tomorrow night, then the next. Over time, your inner world adjusts. When the inner world adjusts, the outer world follows. Life rewards those who are patient with growth. Quick change excites the mind. Slow change builds character. Listening while sleeping is a long-term decision. It says you value steady improvement over sudden motivation. That mindset alone shifts reality. Remember that you are always becoming something. Every day, every night, you are shaped by what you repeatedly allow into your mind. Sleep is not an escape from growth. It is a doorway to it. Use it wisely. Use it gently. Use it consistently. Change does not have to be loud. It does not need struggle to be real. Sometimes the most powerful shifts happen while you rest. Chapter 2. Train your brain without trying hard. Most people think training the brain requires pressure, force, and constant self-control. They believe growth only happens when you push, fight, and exhaust yourself mentally. That belief alone keeps many people stuck. The brain does not respond best to tension. It responds best to direction given calmly and consistently. When pressure drops, learning rises. That is not theory. That is human behavior. Think about how people actually learn in daily life. They pick things up without effort all the time. They absorb attitudes from family. They adopt habits from their environment. They learn language by hearing it repeatedly, not by struggling with it. This tells us something important. The brain is always training itself. The question is not whether training happens. The question is who is in control of what it learns. Trying hard often creates inner resistance. When you force change, part of the mind pushes back. It protects what feels familiar. Familiar does not mean healthy. It just means known. When effort turns into pressure, the brain tightens. When the brain tightens, growth slows. That is why so many people start strong and quit. They confuse effort with progress. Training the brain without trying hard means working with how the mind naturally functions. It means replacing strain with repetition. Calm repetition. Gentle exposure. The brain accepts what it hears often, especially when it feels relaxed. This is why casual comments stick. This is why words spoken during emotional moments stay longer. The mind records what it hears when defenses are low. Hard trying keeps defenses high. Soft consistency lowers them. This is not about being lazy. It is about being smart. Effort should be placed in choosing the right input, not in forcing belief. Belief forms on its own when the mind feels safe enough to accept new ideas. Pay attention to how the brain behaves when you are relaxed. You are more open. You listen better. You consider ideas instead of rejecting them. That openness is the key. You do not need to convince yourself aggressively. You need to expose yourself patiently. People often say they want discipline, but what they really want is ease. They want change without exhaustion. That is reasonable. The brain was not designed to live under constant pressure. It was designed to adapt. Adaptation happens quietly, slowly, repeatedly. When you stop trying so hard, you start noticing things. You notice that your thoughts change without effort. You notice reactions soften. You notice space between impulse and action. That space is the result of training done gently. It does not announce itself. It simply shows up as better choices. Trying hard focuses attention on results. Training gently focuses attention on process. Results follow process whether you watch them or not. When you obsess over outcomes, tension builds. When you focus on input, growth feels natural. Training the brain without strain also changes your relationship with failure. When effort is heavy, mistakes feel personal. When effort is light, mistakes feel informative. You adjust instead of quitting. You continue instead of judging yourself. The brain prefers rhythm over force. Small repeated actions build neural familiarity. Familiarity becomes comfort. Comfort becomes belief. This is how identity shifts. Not through dramatic decisions, but through repeated experiences that feel safe. Think about daily habits. People say habits are hard to change. They are only hard when approached with pressure. Habits respond well to environment and repetition. When the brain sees the same message repeatedly, it stops questioning it. Questioning takes energy. The brain conserves energy by accepting what feels consistent. Training without trying hard also protects emotional health. Stress narrows thinking. Calm expands it. When calm is present, creativity increases. Problem solving improves. Perspective widens. None of this happens under pressure. This approach respects human limits. You do not need constant motivation. Motivation fades. Systems last. Repetition lasts. Gentle exposure lasts. These are reliable tools. They do not depend on mood. Notice how the body learns physical movements. Repetition builds coordination. You do not yell at your muscles to learn. You repeat the movement. The brain works the same way. Repetition without stress builds familiarity. Familiarity builds skill. When people struggle to change, they often blame willpower. Willpower is limited. Exposure is powerful. What you hear regularly shapes how you think automatically. Automatic thinking drives most behavior. Train that level and effort drops naturally. Training the brain this way also improves patience. You stop demanding instant proof. You trust gradual change. That trust removes anxiety. Anxiety blocks learning. Calm allows it. You begin to see progress in subtle ways. You pause before reacting. You choose words more carefully. You feel less urgency to prove anything. These are signs of inner training. Quiet signs. Reliable signs. Trying hard often leads to burnout. Training gently leads to sustainability. Sustainable growth beats intense effort every time. Anyone can push for a week. Few can maintain pressure for years. Long-term change requires ease. This approach also builds self-respect. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are guiding yourself. Guidance builds trust. Trust builds cooperation. The mind cooperates when it feels supported. You do not need to overhaul your life. You need to shape what enters your mind consistently. Training happens whether you notice it or not. Choose to direct it. The brain is not stubborn. It is protective. Remove threat and it opens. Remove pressure and it learns. This is not weakness. It is intelligence. When effort becomes gentle, consistency becomes possible. When consistency becomes possible, change becomes inevitable. That is the quiet power of training without strain. Growth does not need noise. It does not need struggle. It needs direction applied with patience. The brain will do the rest. Respect how learning truly works. Use repetition. Use calm. Use time. These are tools that never fail when applied steadily. The most powerful changes often feel simple. Simple does not mean shallow. It means aligned with how humans actually function. Train the brain the way it prefers to be trained, without force, without pressure, with steady input and patience. Reality adjusts naturally when the mind is guided gently. Chapter 3. Replace stress thoughts while you rest. Most people go to bed thinking the day is over. They believe sleep is just a break from the real work. But what they don't realize is that stress keeps working even while the body shuts down. Thoughts don't disappear just because the eyes are closed. Worry, self-doubt, pressure from the day, they follow you into the night. And the truth is, many people wake up already tired. Not because they didn't sleep, but because their mind never really rested. Replacing stress thoughts while you rest isn't about fixing something broken. It's about stopping what doesn't need to continue. The mind holds on to what it hears often. That includes the inner voice that repeats all the things that went wrong, all the things left unfinished, and all the fears about what tomorrow might bring. That cycle doesn't just affect sleep quality, it shapes the mood you carry into the next day. If stress is the last thing you think about before bed and the first thing you feel in the morning, that pattern starts to define how you see yourself, your choices, and your future. But here's the good news. That cycle can be changed. You don't need to fight stress thoughts. You need to replace them, and you can do it while your body rests. This is not about pretending everything is fine. It's not about ignoring real problems. It's about giving your brain something better to focus on when your guard is down. When you're not awake and analyzing, when the subconscious mind is quietly listening, replacing stress thoughts while resting means creating space for better input. The human brain cannot hold two opposing thoughts at once. You cannot feel deep anxiety and deep calm at the same exact moment. One has to give. You can use that truth. You can give your brain something calm to hold on to when the world is quiet and your body has nothing to do. This isn't about force. It's about creating an environment. Just like a child learns the sound of a parent's voice by hearing it day after day. Your brain learns to trust new thoughts through gentle exposure. The more your mind hears peace, support, and reassurance while it's resting, the less it clings to fear and pressure. Stress loses its grip when it's not fed. Think about how most people end their day. They scroll their phone, they watch the news, they think about what went wrong, and then they expect to feel relaxed. But relaxation doesn't happen by accident. You have to guide your mind toward it. One way is through sound. Calm, simple, positive language can interrupt the cycle of stress even when you're asleep. That's because the subconscious never stops listening. During sleep, the brain processes memories, emotions, and information. It sorts through the noise. If you feed it new input while it's doing this, you're helping it reorganize the way it stores and reacts to your experiences. You're not changing the past. You're changing the meaning of it. You're giving it a new lens to look through. That's real progress. Replacing stress thoughts doesn't mean avoiding challenges. Life will still have problems, but your response to those problems becomes different. You begin to wake up with more space between your thoughts, more clarity, more calm. You don't overreact as quickly. You're not carrying yesterday's anxiety into today. That shift doesn't require effort during the day. It requires intentional rest at night. Imagine ending your day with peaceful, empowering words. Not shouting, not hyping, just clear, steady reminders that you are safe, that growth is happening, and that you don't need to fix everything right now. Over time, your brain starts to expect those messages. It begins to choose them automatically. And once they feel normal, stress doesn't have the same control. This kind of change works best when it becomes part of your routine. It's not about perfection. Some nights you'll feel connected. Other nights you'll just fall asleep. Both are fine. The key is showing up. Let the audio play. Let the new thoughts do their work in the background. You don't need to analyze or understand every word. You only need to allow it in. Many people struggle with stress because they think their thoughts define them. But thoughts are habits, and like all habits, they can be changed. Resting time is one of the easiest times to reshape that habit. You're not distracted. You're not reacting. You're not being pulled in 10 directions. You're still. That stillness can be used wisely. There is no need to feel guilty for resting. Rest is not laziness. It's repair. And when that rest includes the right kind of mental input, the repair goes deeper. The nervous system calms down. Breathing slows. Emotions reset. This is how your body and mind prepare for a new day. Don't waste that window by filling it with noise. Give yourself permission to heal while you sleep. Let go of the belief that stress is something you have to carry. It's not your identity. It's a learned pattern. And learned patterns can be unlearned. You don't need loud motivation. You don't need dramatic speeches. You just need calm, steady reminders repeated consistently. You might notice that your dreams become different. You might notice you wake up feeling less tense. You might feel more patient with others. These are signs that your internal state is changing. Not because you forced it, but because you replaced the thoughts that weren't helping with ones that quietly supported you. This isn't about being positive all the time. That's not real life. It's about giving equal space to thoughts that build you up. Most people give their worries 8 hours every night, but give their hopes 5 minutes in the morning. That balance needs to shift. And it can, starting with the time you spend asleep. Let your rest be a space where the pressure. Let it be a space where your mind gets new ideas without needing to earn them. You don't need to qualify for peace. You need to allow it. The more often you do, the more natural it becomes. And when peace becomes natural, stress loses its power. Real change isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like sleeping with better thoughts. Sometimes it looks like feeling a little lighter when you wake up. Don't underestimate what your mind is willing to let go of when you give it something better to hold. Start tonight, not next week. Not when you feel ready tonight. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're allowed to rest with better thoughts now. You're allowed to feel peace even before you solve everything. You're allowed to replace stress, not because you're weak, but because you're human, and humans are not designed to carry tension forever. They are designed to reset. Give yourself that gift over and over again until it becomes your new normal. Chapter 4. Absorb better ideas during deep sleep. Every night your body shuts down to rest, but your mind does not fully turn off. While you're asleep, something powerful continues inside your brain. Thoughts are sorted, emotions are processed, and your memory system becomes active. In that deep state, you're not thinking the way you do during the day, but your brain is still open and it's listening. This is the perfect moment to feed it something better. Not more noise, not empty distractions, but better ideas, clear, steady, and supportive messages that can reach deeper when everything else goes quiet. Most people only focus on what they feed their brain when they're awake. They listen to motivational talks during the day. They read self-help books when they're alert. They try to remember affirmations in between tasks. That's good, but it's incomplete because the mind doesn't just learn while you're awake. It learns when your defenses are down. And those defenses fall away in deep sleep. That's when the doors open. That's when your system becomes receptive in a different way. Not through effort, through stillness. The average person spends about 1/3 of their life asleep. That's not wasted time. That's opportunity. You don't need to be awake to absorb new beliefs. You just need to be exposed to them in the right mental state. During deep sleep, your brain filters less. It becomes less resistant. It's no longer judging every word. It's not arguing with your goals. It's not holding on to negative patterns with the same intensity. Instead, it's processing, organizing, softening. That's the window when new information can reach your core. You don't have to try harder. You just have to be intentional with what you allow it. Absorbing better ideas during sleep is about surrounding yourself with the words, emotions, and tones that match the life you want to live. It doesn't matter if you consciously remember every word. What matters is consistency. The brain responds to repetition. It always has. Repetition builds comfort. Comfort builds trust. Trust opens the door for belief. And belief is what shapes behavior, not facts, not logic, not data. Belief is what drives action. Belief comes from what you've heard, seen, and felt enough times to accept without question. So if most of your input comes from doubt, fear, and pressure, that becomes your operating system. But if your environment shifts even while you sleep, your foundation starts to rebuild. You might be wondering if this really works. You might think, can I really change how I think just by listening to something while I'm asleep? The answer is yes, because that's how the brain is designed. It learns in layers. First through exposure, then through emotion, then through repetition. If something is repeated enough, especially in a calm state, the brain files it under. This must be important. That's why you still remember the sound of someone's voice from years ago. That's why certain songs bring back feelings without trying. Sleep learning is not magic. It's memory and emotion working in a deeper layer. This kind of practice isn't about waking up the next morning and feeling like a new person. It's about small shifts that add up. Maybe you notice you're more patient. Maybe a problem doesn't overwhelm you as much. Maybe you speak to yourself more kindly. These changes feel quiet, but they're powerful. They signal that the mind is letting go of old patterns and picking up something healthier. Absorbing better ideas during deep sleep also supports emotional regulation. When your subconscious hears calm, positive, and focused words every night, it gets familiar with safety. Safety matters. It's the foundation for mental flexibility. People often stay stuck in fear and stress because they haven't trained their nervous system to feel safe in calm. That can be changed through nightly exposure to words that bring reassurance instead of tension. You don't need to overthink this. Start simple. Choose a voice that feels grounded and real. Choose words that align with who you're becoming. Let them play softly while you sleep. Not loud, not distracting. Just present enough to be heard. You don't need to force your mind to absorb anything. Just let it hear. Over time, something inside begins to shift. Your choices during the day start to align with the messages you've been hearing at night. You stop sabotaging progress. You stop repeating old emotional patterns. You begin acting more like the person you want to be. Not because you pushed yourself, but because your mind was reintroduced to better ideas when it was ready to receive them. You also begin to notice that not all ideas are worth keeping. As your mind becomes more familiar with supportive thoughts, it starts to reject the ones that hurt. You find yourself walking away from unnecessary arguments. You catch yourself before spiraling into self-criticism. That's not luck. That's mental rewiring. That's the result of changing what your mind experiences while you sleep. This is not a short-term solution. This is a way to gently upgrade your inner world, one night at a time. You don't need new tools every week. You need a simple, reliable practice that your brain can rely on while it rests. Just as the body heals in sleep, so can your mindset when it's exposed to the right input. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to hear every second of the audio. You don't even need to believe every word at first. All you need is the willingness to replace what hasn't helped you with something better. That's where change begins. Not in dramatic declarations, inconsistent, quiet exposure to ideas that build rather than break you. Some nights it might feel like nothing is happening. That's okay. Change doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it's just the absence of tension. Sometimes it's a better morning without knowing why. Keep going. The brain is always listening, always adjusting, always learning. The world is loud. During the day, your mind is pulled in 100 directions. But the night belongs to you. And when you use that time wisely, when you fill those hours with better input, the results show up in ways that last. Not through pressure, through peace, through presence, through the steady practice of giving your mind the support it's always needed. Start tonight. Let better ideas take root while everything else slows down. No pressure, no expectations, just better input. One night at a time, your future self is shaped by what you repeatedly hear. And deep sleep is your chance to listen in a way that truly transforms. Chapter 5. Let sleep time rebuild your mindset. Most people treat sleep as a break from life. They see it as something that happens when the day is done and nothing more. But sleep isn't just downtime. It's not just recovery for the body. It's one of the most powerful periods for shaping your mindset. The same way your body heals and restores itself while you sleep, your mind can do the same if you give it the right conditions. The mindset you carry into tomorrow isn't only built from what you do during the day. It's also shaped by how you rest at night and what your mind is exposed to while you sleep. There is something about sleep that brings everything back to zero. The pressure of the day fades. The noise dies down. The inner critic gets quieter. The outside world stops demanding attention. That's when your mind becomes open in a different way. Not distracted, not defensive, not busy, just still. And that stillness makes it possible to rebuild the way you think. Not through pressure, not through force, through permission. Your mindset is not a fixed identity. It's not something you're born with that never changes. It's a pattern, a collection of beliefs, emotional reactions, thoughts, and assumptions you've picked up over time. Most of those weren't chosen carefully. They came from repetition, from people you were around, from moments that left an impact. But the good news is what was built through experience can be rebuilt with new experience. Even while you sleep, when you're asleep, your brain is far from inactive. It is reorganizing memories. It is sorting emotional triggers. It is filing away what matters and what doesn't. This is where change begins. Not in more pressure, but in better input. The brain uses what it's exposed to repeatedly to shape perception. And sleep gives you the chance to offer it better material without resistance. Without interruption, without needing energy or focus. Rebuilding your mindset during sleep doesn't mean you're doing nothing. It means you're doing something smart. You're handing your mind new messages during the hours when it doesn't push back. Think about how many negative ideas your brain absorbs during the day. Comparison, fear, self-doubt, deadlines, pressure, noise. You hear those messages enough and they feel real. So now imagine replacing them with calm, focused, positive, empowering ideas while your body busts. You don't need to fight the old. You only need to feed the new. The mind will begin to accept what it hears most often. When done consistently, this creates a shift that feels natural, not sudden, but steady. The way you respond to stress changes. The way you view problems changes. Even the way you talk to yourself changes. You begin to notice space between the old pattern and the new thought. That space is where freedom lives. That space is a result of giving your brain a new rhythm during rest. It's not about falling asleep to motivational hype. It's about feeding the mind language that makes peace feel normal, that makes calm feel familiar, that makes clarity feel possible. Over time, your nervous system responds to this new rhythm. You start waking up with more mental clarity. You start carrying a lighter emotional load. Not because life got easier, but because your inner world got stronger. The mindset you wake up with doesn't come from nowhere. It's built through the signals your brain processed during sleep. If those signals are full of guilt, worry, or pressure, you wake up tight and guarded. But if those signals are full of encouragement, focus, and reassurance, you wake up open and steady. That difference shows up in everything. How you talk, how you react, how you show up for others, and how you move through your goals. Most people try to rebuild their mindset in the middle of chaos. They wait until things go wrong. They try to push through stress with more effort, but effort without clarity leads to burnout. What you need is a base, a calm internal base you can return to. Sleep gives you the chance to build that, and it happens quietly beneath the surface without pressure. Rebuilding through sleep is not passive. It's powerful. It requires intention. You choose what kind of input your brain receives before bed. You create an environment that supports that input. You make your room a space for healing, not just escape. You treat sleep as something sacred, not something to rush through or ignore. These choices shape your progress more than people realize. This also removes the excuse of "I don't have time." Everyone sleeps. Everyone spends hours each night unconscious. The question is, are you using those hours to reinforce the mindset you want, or are you letting your mind repeat the same old patterns in the dark? You don't need more time. You need more awareness of what time you already have. Start with small steps. Use audio that feels calm and real. Avoid noise that pressures you to perform. Choose words that align with peace, growth, and self-trust. Let those words play as you rest. Not loud, not forced, just enough to be present in the background of your sleep. This simple practice builds something powerful. A mental environment that helps you think clearly, respond thoughtfully, and feel more grounded without needing to control everything during the day. You might not notice results right away. That's normal. You don't notice a tree growing either, but it's growing. What matters is consistency. One night doesn't change a mindset, but 30 nights can. 90 nights can. Half a year of sleeping with new input can reshape the way you process life. And that change lasts longer than any motivational spike ever could. Your future self is shaped by what you practice now. If you want to live with more focus, peace, and strength, you need to make those ideas familiar. Not just during busy mornings, during the quiet hours, the honest hours, the time when you're not pretending or performing, just resting. That's when the foundation gets built. That's when you're not in the way. That's when the mind gets to work on a level you don't see, but absolutely feel over time. Mindset isn't what you tell yourself it's what you've trained yourself to believe repeatedly. Let sleep be part of that training. Let your rest become the time when everything that matters is gently reinforced and everything that doesn't is slowly released. The stress, the pressure, the fear, they don't need to follow you into the night anymore. They've had enough space. Now it's time for better input. Let the hours of sleep become hours of growth. Let them become the place where healing begins, where strength returns, and where your mindset is not just managed, but rebuilt one night at a time with no pressure, just practice, just peace, just presence. You don't need to force anything. You only need to trust the process. Show up for it, make rest at all, and over time, watch how different life begins to feel. Not just in your head, but in your choices, your emotions, and the way you see what's possible. Chapter 6. Improve life quietly while you sleep. Change doesn't always have to be loud to be real. Sometimes the strongest transformation happens in the quiet hours when no one is watching, when nothing is being posted online, and when your eyes are closed and your body is still. Improving your life while you sleep might sound too simple, maybe even too soft. But that's the beauty of it. Progress doesn't always come with a big push. Some of the most powerful breakthroughs happen in silence, without pressure, without force, and especially without noise. Your life moves in the direction of what your mind becomes used to. And your mind is always listening, even when you're not fully awake. You might think the day is when all the action happens, but night has its own kind of power. At night, your conscious mind rests, but your deeper mind continues working. It sorts what you've experienced. It processes meaning. It connects ideas. But most importantly, it listens. This is not about multitasking while you sleep. It's about working with how the brain naturally operates. During the day, your thoughts are often influenced by other people, deadlines, problems, decisions, and distractions. But when you're asleep, those things step aside. That's when your mind becomes available in a different way. Not because you're doing more, but because everything else is doing less. This kind of growth is not about chasing results. It's about shifting the foundation. The way you see yourself, the way you expect life to treat you, the tone of your inner voice. Those things don't just shift because you read a book or watch a video. They shift when you start feeding your brain different input. And when you do it often enough that it feels normal, you've already been conditioned by years of repeating thoughts, messages, and reactions. Many of those patterns were picked up without choice. They came from early conversations, difficult moments, and repeated emotional responses that felt true over time. But if that conditioning built the mindset you have now, then new conditioning can build something better. It just needs to be intentional. Sleep is the ideal time for that kind of work because your critical mind, the part that questions and analyzes everything, is finally quiet. In that space, you have an open path to the parts of you that carry your deepest belief. That's where you place new ideas. Not ideas filled with hype, but ideas that bring peace. Words that encourage progress. Reminders that you're allowed to improve even without constant effort. Reassurance that your worth isn't tied to what you achieve, but who you become. The reason this works is simple. The subconscious accepts what it hears the most. If that input is fear, guilt, or doubt, then those become your filter for the world. But if the input is trust, direction, and clarity, then life begins to feel less chaotic. You're not changing external reality directly. You're shifting how you process it. And that shift determines what you notice, how you react, and what you choose. When people say they want to improve their life, what they really want is to think more clearly, feel more capable, and act more consistently. That starts with what they believe is possible. You can't outperform your identity. You can't make choices that go against your most practiced thought. So, if you want better results, you start by giving your mind something better to believe. And you repeat it until it becomes natural. Listening to new ideas while you sleep is not about solving everything overnight. It's about adjusting direction. Even 1 or 2 degrees makes a difference when repeated over time. You won't wake up with all the answers, but you will start to feel different, lighter, quieter inside, less reactive. And from that place, you begin to make different choices during the day without forcing it. This quiet practice doesn't ask for extra time. You don't need more hours in the day. You just use the ones you already have with more awareness. Instead of falling asleep with stress in the background, you create a new environment, a space where your mind is surrounded by calm and direction. That shift creates a ripple effect. Sleep becomes more than rest. It becomes support, a space where your growth continues. Even when your body slows down, you'll start to notice that your first thoughts in the morning aren't so heavy, that you begin the day with more emotional space, that you're not rushing to fix things before your feet even touch the floor. Those little differences matter. They build momentum, and that momentum turns into better days. Not because you pushed harder, but because your mind was trained to think with more ease. This is a sustainable way to grow. It doesn't rely on motivation, willpower, or perfect routines. It just needs consistency. You don't need to be in a perfect mood to sleep. You don't need to be fully engaged. You just need to create the habit of listening to something helpful while you rest and keep doing it night after night until your mind starts to prefer it. Most people don't change because they keep repeating the same mental environment. Sleep gives you a chance to build a new one. Not a dramatic one, a steady one, a safe one that supports you without demand. This is also one of the few times in life where progress feels gentle. It's not tied to productivity. It doesn't require you to prove anything. It just asks you to show up for yourself in a quiet way. And in a world that constantly asks for more, that kind of simplicity is powerful. There's something comforting about knowing that improvement can happen without pressure. That you can get better without always doing more. That you can change deeply without announcing it to the world. This is your space, your time, your practice. Each night is a new opportunity, a new round of input, a new moment to feed your mind what it truly needs. If you do that often enough, you won't need to convince yourself to grow. Growth will become something your system recognizes, something your thoughts lean toward, something your choices begin to reflect. This is not about tricking the brain. It's about trusting it, trusting that it wants better for you and that it just needs the right support. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from awareness. That's more than enough. So tonight, instead of letting your thoughts drift back into the same old patterns, give yourself something better, something calming, something clear. Let your mind rest in words that speak to the version of you that's already growing. You don't need to see the results right away. You only need to trust that real change doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it moves in silence and it's just as real, maybe even more. Chapter 7. Wake up thinking better than before. There's a moment in the morning when your eyes are still closed, but your mind starts to return. You're not fully awake yet. You're not deep in sleep either. That moment holds more power than most people realize. It's a transition, a handoff between rest and responsibility, between the subconscious and the conscious. What happens in that moment can shape how the rest of your day feels. And when you've spent your sleeping hours surrounding your mind with clarity, calm, and better thoughts, you don't just wake up. You wake up thinking better than before. Waking up better starts the night before. It doesn't begin with your alarm clock. It begins with what you allow into your mental space before sleep. If you go to bed tense, worried, or mentally scattered, your mind doesn't reset. It carries that energy forward. But if you use that time to send your brain into rest with better input, you give it something to work with, something worth holding onto through the night. The mind is never off, even when you're asleep. It's listening, organizing, sorting. It's preparing your next day before you're aware of it. The average morning doesn't feel intentional for most people. They wake up already rushed, already behind, already reacting. But that doesn't have to be your default. You can train your system to start from a different place, a place that feels steady instead of scattered. This isn't about waking up full of energy every day. It's about waking up with better thoughts already in motion. Not because you forced them, but because you spent the night building a better base. The brain is a pattern machine. It leans into whatever has been repeated. If negativity is what it hears most, that becomes its starting point. But if focus, calm, and clarity are repeated instead, even while you sleep, the brain begins to build from that material. That's why the way you think in the morning can feel so different once you start feeding your mind something better the night before. You don't have to wake up and convince yourself to be positive. You don't need to force motivation when your internal environment has been nourished overnight. You start with less resistance. You start with more space. Your first thoughts are clearer. Your mood is lighter. And you're not carrying yesterday's weight by default. One of the most underrated parts of growth is how you begin the day. Not with habits you check off, but with mindset you didn't have to build from scratch every morning. When your thoughts are better, your decisions are better. When decisions are better, your outcomes improve. It sounds simple, but it's the difference between a chaotic loop and a grounded life. You might not notice this change right away, and that's fine. Progress isn't always loud. Sometimes you wake up and just feel slightly more at ease, slightly more patient, slightly more open to the day ahead. That's not an accident. That's the result of better programming, quietly reshaping how you process life. The thoughts you wake up with don't appear by chance. They're a reflection of what you've been practicing, even unconscious. This isn't about replacing every negative thought. That's not realistic. It's about raising your baseline. It's about making better thinking the new normal. When that happens, everything else becomes easier. You start the day with direction, not confusion, with stability, not scattered energy. And you begin to build momentum from the first minute instead of scrambling to find your balance after you've already been pulled in 10 directions. Waking up thinking better than before also means you're not waking up reacting to your phone, emails, or social media right away. You're not letting external input shape your mental state before your own thoughts have had space to settle. You begin the day on your own terms from your own internal signal, and that signal gets clearer when you've slept with better input. People often think of mindset work as something they have to do during the day. But real change happens through repetition and rhythm. That's why night is so important. It's the perfect time to create a consistent message, one that speaks to who you're becoming. When you listen to the right words during sleep, they bypass the part of the mind that argues, they go directly to the part that listens and stores. Then in the morning, those words become part of your thinking. Not because you memorized them, because your brain accepted them, and now they echo back in the form of calm readiness and strength. This is not a trick. This is how the brain works. You've just chosen to work with it instead of against it. This practice isn't difficult. It doesn't ask for more energy. It only asks for intention. You don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to start. You can play a short message as you fall asleep. You can choose words that bring peace, focus, or gratitude. You can decide to protect the final thoughts your brain hears before it rests. That alone can shift how you feel in the first moments of the next day. And over time, that shift adds up. You start to realize you're more consistent. You notice that you don't spiral into stress as quickly. You find that your emotional reactions are more measured. That's the result of better thoughts being planted in the quiet hours. You're not trying to control every situation. You're building the kind of mindset that handles situations differently. It's not about escaping struggle. It's about facing it with a clearer mind. One that's been shaped in calm, not chaos. One that's been strengthened during sleep, not drained by it. One that wakes up ready to respond, not simply react. You don't need permission to do this. You don't need perfect condition. You just need the willingness to show up for yourself in a way most people ignore. And that means respecting how your mind prepares itself for the next day even when you're not awake. There's something deeply empowering about waking up and realizing your first thoughts are actually helping you instead of holding you back. That they're supporting your goals, not doubting them. That they're opening your day, not closing it off. That's the kind of change that feels real because it is. Every morning is a new starting line. And when you've spent the night preparing quietly, your first steps feel lighter. You're not dragging yourself forward. You're already facing the right direction. That's the difference. That's the power of letting your sleep set you up. Not just to rest, but to return better. Start small. Pick a few words or ideas that matter to you. Play them gently as you rest. Keep doing it. Don't chase a feeling. Build a rhythm, and you'll see, one morning at a time, your thoughts will begin to meet you in a better place. A place you prepared for. A place you created. A place that was always possible. You just hadn't heard it enough until Chapter 8. Repeat sleep. Listening to grow naturally. Growth that lasts doesn't come from a single decision. It comes from repetition. Not the kind that feels forced, but the kind that becomes part of your rhythm. The kind that doesn't feel like work because it fits naturally into your life. Repeating sleep listening is one of those quiet practices that builds change under the surface. It doesn't demand your full attention. It doesn't ask you to sit still and focus. It works in the background. And when you return to it night after night, it starts shaping your mind in a way that feels real without pressure. You don't need to hear something once for it to matter. You need to hear it often. That's how the brain learns. Repetition sends a signal. This matters. This is safe. This is true. It doesn't matter if the words are simple. What matters is how often they show up. That frequency builds a sense of familiarity, and familiarity turns into belief. Most people underestimate this. They think they need new information all the time. But what they really need is steady reminders of the truth they want to live by. Sleep is the perfect time for that kind of input. Your conscious mind may be resting, but the parts of your brain are still sorting and storing. They're still listening. So when you repeat the same kind of positive, focused, grounded messages during sleep, your system adapts to it. It begins to accept those words as part of your mental environment. You're not trying to convince yourself during the day anymore. You're creating a mental world that supports growth without effort. This isn't about doing more. It's about being more intentional with what's already there. You sleep anyway. You rest every night. The hours are already part of your life. You're simply using those hours to do something helpful, something gentle, something sustainable. Repeating the right kind of input during sleep isn't a hack. It's a decision to make your growth automatic. To build change through rhythm instead of struggle. And that rhythm matters more than intensity. You don't need to play hours of content each night. You just need something steady, something consistent. Even a few minutes of focused, calming audio repeated every night can shape how you think, how you feel, and how you act. You don't notice the shift right away. That's what makes it powerful. It becomes part of your normal. Think about how many thoughts you've repeated for years without meaning to. I'm not enough. It's too late. I don't know how those thoughts didn't come from one event. They came from repetition. Maybe you heard them from others. Maybe you started telling them to yourself, but over time they stuck. Not because they were true, but because they were familiar. Now imagine using that same process to install better thoughts. Not dramatic, just consistent. I am learning. I can grow. Change is happening. Say them long enough. Hear them often enough. And they begin to feel natural. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress. You're not trying to erase all doubt. You're teaching your brain what direction to lean toward. Every night you repeat sleep listening. You're reminding yourself of that direction. You're building a foundation that holds even when the day is hard. That's what repetition creates, stability. It gives you something solid to return to. And this doesn't need to be complicated. Pick a short message that aligns with who you want to become. Choose a tone that feels calm and steady. Play it softly as you fall asleep. Not loud enough to disturb, but just enough to be present. Then do it again the next night and the next. No pressure, no need to overthink. Just show up. Let the rhythm carry you forward. Some nights you'll feel connected to the words. Other nights you'll fall asleep before you hear much at all. That's okay. What matters is that your mind is being exposed to the same kind of message again and again. That exposure builds trust, and trust is the root of real mindset change. You can't fake it. You can't force it. You have to grow into it. And sleep listening gives you a path to do that without wearing yourself out. Over time, you'll start to notice changes, subtle ones. You respond instead of react. You pause before judging yourself. You feel more grounded when something stressful shows up. You didn't get there through sudden effort. You got there through quiet consistency. You practiced the thoughts you wanted to keep and they became your new normal. That's what it means to grow naturally. You're not chasing motivation. You're not trying to fix everything at once. You're choosing better input and allowing it to do its work while you rest. Growth becomes a side effect of the rhythm you've created. And the best part is it lasts because it wasn't built through hype. It was built through repetition. It's easy to skip the practice when you don't see results fast. But this isn't about fast. It's about deep. Real change happens over time through steady exposure, through quiet practice, through doing something supportive even when you don't feel like it's making a difference. Because it always is. So don't look for instant proof. Look for patterns. Look for how you speak to yourself without trying. Look for how you handle small setback. Look for the sense of calm that shows up where there used to be noise. Those are signs that the repetition is working, that you're becoming someone new. Not because you fought harder, but because you practiced smart. There is something powerful about knowing that while you sleep, your growth continues. That while your body rests, your mind receives that while the world is quiet, you are becoming stronger without pressure. That kind of progress feels different, it's grounded, it's stable, it lasts. Keep going, keep repeating. Keep choosing the kind of input that reflects the life you want to build. Let your nights work for you. Let your growth come with ease. Let your mindset be shaped not by what happened in the past, but by what you choose to hear now again and again until it becomes who you are. You don't need to do everything at once. Just keep listening, keep showing up, and trust that this kind of repetition leads exactly where you're meant to go. Chapter 9. Stop forcing change and rest into growth. Change doesn't happen just because you want it. It happens when the conditions are right for it. Most people spend their lives forcing themselves to grow. They push, they strain, they try to control every part of the process. And when they don't see immediate results, they think something is wrong with them. But growth doesn't respond well to pressure. It responds to the environment it's given. And the truth is, the more you try to force transformation, the more you block it. Real growth comes when you allow space, when you stop squeezing so hard and give yourself permission to grow naturally. And that starts with rest. Rest isn't about doing nothing. It's about giving your mind and body the chance to adjust without being pushed. When you rest into growth, you're not giving up. You're shifting your approach. You're moving away from force and toward trust. Trust that the work you've done is enough. Trust that your mind is listening. Trust that your efforts don't need to be chased every second of the day. We've been trained to believe that everything good must come from hustle. That if we're not always doing, we're falling behind. But that belief creates burnout. It traps people in a cycle of self-pity pressure where even rest feels wrong. The result? Exhaustion with no real progress. You don't need to fight yourself into becoming someone new. You need to build a foundation where change feels safe enough to unfold. Resting into growth means knowing when to stop pushing. It means understanding that your brain learns more effectively when it's not overwhelmed. When you sleep, your mind isn't offline. It's operating in a different way. A way that's subtle, a way that's deep. This is the perfect time to allow new ideas to settle in. Not by force, but by repetition and calm exposure. When you stop forcing change, your nervous system relaxes. That relaxation tells your brain it's okay to let go of old habits. It tells your emotions they don't need to be on high alert. You create space for new thoughts to rise, not from effort, but from ease. This is not about being passive. It's about being wise enough to work with how change really happens. Every night is a chance to remind your system what matters. You don't need to rewrite your whole mindset in one night. You just need to give it better direction, gentle words, calm guidance, simple reminders of who you are becoming. These don't need to be shouted. They don't need to be analyzed. They just need to be heard often enough to become familiar. And as those words become part of your mental environment, you begin to feel a difference. Not in a loud, obvious way, but in small moments. You pause before reacting. You feel a little more present. You notice a softness in the way you speak to yourself. These are signs that change is happening without strain. Think about how growth happens in nature. Plants don't grow by being pulled. They grow because the soil is right, the conditions are healthy, and time is allowed to do its job. The same is true for you. You grow when the environment is supportive, not when it's hostile. You grow when you're rested, not when you're running on fumes. And you grow when you stop demanding proof and start practicing patience. Using your sleep to support growth isn't complicated. It just means deciding what kind of thoughts you want to carry into tomorrow. What kind of beliefs you want to reinforce, what kind of energy you want to bring into the next day. And then gently placing those things into your night. Not with pressure, not with expectation, just with consistency. Some people think resting means losing progress. They believe if they're not doing something active, nothing is happening. But the opposite is often true. When you rest with intention, the work you've already done starts to settle in. Ideas connect. Emotions calm down. Your inner world becomes quieter, and in that quiet clarity grows. You don't need to push harder. You don't need to figure everything out tonight. You just need to let your system breathe. Let it rest. Let it settle into a state where growth feels safe. You've spent enough time chasing change. Now it's time to receive it. This kind of shift won't always feel productive at first. It won't give you the instant satisfaction that comes from crossing things off a list, but over time it gives you something better. Peace of mind, stability, a sense of steady forward movement that doesn't collapse under pressure. That's what resting into growth creates. A deeper kind of progress. And when that becomes your way of living, everything starts to shift. You stop measuring yourself by how much you've done in a day. You start paying attention to how you feel, how you think, and how present you are in your own life. You move from stress to strength. Not because you forced it, but because you made room for it. So, if you've been feeling stuck or tired or like nothing's working, consider this. Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you've just been trying too hard. Maybe your system is asking for something softer, something steadier. Something that doesn't require more pushing. The next time you go to bed, take that moment seriously. Decide what kind of energy you want to carry with you into rest. Choose thoughts that support you. Listen to words that build you. Remind yourself that change is already happening because you've shown up. You've been consistent, and now you're creating space for all of that to settle. And trust this. The deepest growth doesn't need to be forced. It just needs to be supported, allowed, honored. When you rest into growth, you stop getting in your own way. You stop interrupting the process, and you start becoming who you were always capable of being, with less resistance, less tension, and far more peace. Keep going. But this time, go gently. Growth will meet you there. Chapter 10. Use sleep time to shape reality. Every night you step away from the noise of the world. You unplug from responsibilities, conversations, and decisions. But your mind doesn't shut down. It continues working. It sorts your emotions. It replays memories. It files experiences. It reacts to what it has heard, seen, and felt. While your body rests, your inner world is active, and that inner world is shaping how you see everything the next day. What if you could use that time to guide the process? What if you could give your brain better material to work with while you sleep? You can. And when you do, you begin shaping your reality from the inside out. Reality isn't only what happens around you. It's also what happens inside of you. It's the way you interpret the world. It's how you react to setbacks, how you talk to yourself, how you see people, and how you respond to opportunities. All of that starts with the beliefs you've practiced the most. And many of those beliefs weren't chosen. They were absorbed, some from childhood, some from mistakes, some from pressure. But no matter where they came from, they can be rewritten. And sleep gives you a quiet window to begin. You don't need to force new beliefs. You don't need to fight with the old one. You simply need to feed your mind something different, something steady, something clear, something better. Not once, not occasionally, but repeatedly. The brain is influenced by what it hears most often, especially in a relaxed state, and sleep provides that state every single night. You can either let that time be filled with stress and mental noise, or you can guide it toward growth. Most people try to shape their reality during the day when their energy is low and distractions are high. They try to think positive while they're overwhelmed. They try to focus while being pulled in 10 directions. That's hard. But during sleep, your mind is quieter. The noise fades. Your defenses drop. And that's when new ideas can take root. Not because you're forcing them, but because you're open to them. Imagine going to bed with messages that reinforce calm, purpose, and clarity. Imagine waking up not just feeling rested but mentally prepared. That shift doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing something different. You're not chasing motivation. You're creating mental structure. A structure that your mind builds on night after night. A structure that starts to change the way you feel in daily life. Subtly at first, then noticeably your sleep becomes more than recovery. It becomes creation. A space where the old patterns are softened and new ones are introduced. Your brain doesn't need intensity to change. It needs repetition. Gentle, consistent exposure to better thoughts. That's how beliefs are built. Not through shouting, through familiarity. You become comfortable with new ideas simply because they've been around long enough to feel real. When you wake up with better inner dialogue, it changes how you move through your day. You respond with more clarity. You make decisions from a calmer place. You stop assuming the worst and begin preparing for what's possible. That's not just a mood change. That's a reality shift because your mind no longer sees the world through the same filter. Sleep listening allows you to shift that filter without conscious effort. You're not debating with yourself. You're not trying to control every thought. You're simply making space for new ones to be heard. And the more often you do that, the more natural they become. That's how internal change happens. That's how reality begins to shift without force. You don't need to plan a perfect script. You don't need to understand every line. You just need to choose a message that supports who you want to be. Let it play softly while you rest. Keep it simple. Keep it consistent. The goal isn't to solve every problem in one night. The goal is to build a better mental atmosphere over time. Think about how your current reality was shaped. It came from stories. Stories you were told. Stories you repeated. Stories you accepted. Some of those stories don't serve you anymore. But you've heard them so many times they feel like facts. Now with intention you can introduce new stories, not stories of pressure. Stories of possibility. Stories that reinforce growth without shame. Confidence without noise. Purpose without burnout. When you make sleep a time for intentional input, you stop waiting for the world to shape you. You begin shaping how you respond to the world. And that shift touches every area of life. Relationships feel more grounded. Goals feel more doable. Self-talk feels more stable. You start to build your days from a clearer foundation. Not from leftover stress or fear. This practice doesn't require willpower. It requires patience. It requires showing up each night. Not to perform, but to allow better thoughts to enter. To allow calm messages to settle. To allow the mind to experience something different, and over time that different becomes normal. There is no perfect way to do this. What matters is that you decide. Decide that your sleep can be more than rest, that it can be part of your personal growth. That it can serve a purpose beyond recovery. You don't need to control how fast the change happens. You just need to keep giving it a chance to take shape. This is how you reshape your identity, not through pressure, but through presence, being present with the process, being consistent with the message, being open to the idea that change can happen without pushing. When you trust that your relationship with progress becomes more peaceful, you stop rushing, you start building, and the life you want stops feeling out of reach. Every night is another chance to practice this, another chance to gently shift your beliefs, another chance to speak to the version of you that's still growing. You don't need to overthink. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. Let the words speak for you while you sleep. Let your mind absorb what it needs. Let your body rest while your thoughts reshape themselves into something that supports your future. You've spent enough time waiting for life to change on the outside. Now is the time to change what's happening on the inside. Quietly, repeatedly, gently. Each night becomes a quiet contribution to a different way of thinking. Each morning becomes a reflection of that quiet word. Reality doesn't shift from one big moment. It shifts from small repeated signals. Sleep gives you a window to send those signals without resistance, without distraction, without stress. Use it, trust it, and give yourself permission to shape your inner world while everything else is still. You don't need more time. You just need to use the time you already have in a way that supports the person you're becoming. And that begins tonight.